Figshare is never going to be finished. The only way to truly fix that is to change the structure of how academia works. And I argue with the editors a lot about this, who say it'll never work, we tried it before, all of these things, and I just don't believe them.
Thank you for joining us again. This is a continuation of the previous episode. As always, here's your host, Nikesh Gosalia.
Since it's so deep-rooted and interconnected as well to a lot of the incentives and the rewards that you spoke about, as far as researchers concerned, it could be career progression, it could be furthering, themselves in terms of a specific research field that they're working into. But just from your perspective, again, are there any specific / tangible incentives that can be given to, encourage them to partake in the open science movement?
Science communication and research communication and getting these messages out there is an important one. I know that if you publish a paper and link it to a data set in a repository, that on average, you'll get 25% more citations to the paper itself. Study done on 500,000 papers, so it's not low-end numbers. So that, for me as a researcher, would be an incentive. I'd love 25% more citations in my papers, right? My H-index is not very good. I know that because I work in the field. Not everybody who's working in research knows that because they're busy, because they're focused on that. I would be still focused on that super niche area of stem cell biology. The communication around these things, there's a lot of work that goes into it. I think librarians are heroes for doing this. I think there's a lot of science communication officers within research organizations that do a great job of this, about translating the research to the lay audience so that people can understand things. I think we've been hit a side curve recently with all this fake news stuff and all of the anti-vax stuff. And for me, it just always comes down to people can get behind the idea that if you have all of the information, you can make an informed decision. If you don't have all of the information, you can't make an informed decision. But that's really talking about what's good for humanity and not what's good for the researcher. I think for the researcher, it has to be, you will get rewarded in certain ways by your funder for working in open practices. And we're still at the phase of, in the game of carrots and sticks. I can tell you about the carrots. I can tell you about that citation impact increase. And I can tell you if you publish openly, then more people are going to view your content, download your content, all of these things for open access publishing, proven many times over. But until it comes from the person who pays you, it's very hard to move the needle on that. And so, as I said, I've mentioned it already today, the NIH is a huge one. The biggest funder of biomedical research in the world is saying, if we fund you, when you publish your papers, you have to publish your data. The White House Office of Science and Technology Policy, as you can hear, I'm not American, but America is the biggest producer of research in the world, has said that by 2026, every bit of federally funded research, which includes the National Institute of Health, NASA, NOAA, which is the Ocean and Atmospheric Agency, all of the papers have to be open and all of the data has to be open, full stop. So I think we're moving to a world where the sticks are going to catch up with these naysayers first, and they're just going to have to do it. And then we'll see the flourishing of the rewards and the incentives. I think incentives is always difficult, though, because on average, 25% of papers that have data sets attached get more citations. They get 25% more citations, but not all of them do, right? There's a bell curve there. And just because I say that you will get 25% more citations, you might get 0 more citations because your research isn't that interesting. And this is this dog-eat-dog world of academia. I think the only way to truly fix that is to change the structure of how academia works. You have a lot less problems in pharmaceutical companies around good data practices, good publication practices, and they're incentivized to make money. They have the biggest perverse incentive of all. I think if you changed it, the career structure within it, universities and within academia, that could be the other thing that allows us to move further and faster and doesn't bring in so many perverse incentives into the structure in which we publish research.
With all of these trends, Mark, that we spoke about, like you mentioned, there is the need to maybe publish faster, make it more open. We've probably started in this journey and, we'll have to, of course, we'll see acceleration with some of the policy changes. But just from your perspective, again, as far as traditional publishing space is concerned, how do you see, that maybe say in 5 years' time? I mean, we've seen the growth of preprints. There is the increasing use of AI. There is, more and more conversations around making it more open, but at the same time, going beyond the journal article. How do we kind of engage with lay audiences? How do you see the traditional, publishing space developing over the next 5 years?
There's a few bits in there. So it's funny, I've just come back from traveling around Asia Pacific with a work colleague, and we were talking about some of this stuff. He was quizzing me on whether I thought in that time frame, you may have seen DALL-E, the AI picture drawer. I don't know what it's officially called, but apparently that works for movies. We already have tools that can take a paper and try and make a lay summary out of it. And he said, do you think we'll get explainer videos automatically generated for papers? I was struggling with the concept of, well, these papers are so niche that, DALL-E or similar things to it would struggle to get it accurate enough that the researcher wouldn't be like, well, that's not technically true. If you asked me 5 years ago if we could get something like DALL-E today, then I'd have said no as well. So I think it's always a fantastic thing to be surprised by research. And I think we'll see, particularly in the science communication space, lots more things like that, lots more machine interpretation of information in a way that makes it more accessible to people. I think that's going to be a cool thing. There's going to be, in academic publishing, little step changes on this. We have a sister organization at Digital Science called Repater. And when I was talking before about fast, good, open publishing, there's little things that machines can do for you. And so what they do is they scan the paper and say, just from an ethics standpoint, just from an integrity standpoint, is this an academic paper? Does it have a data availability statement? Does it have an ethics statement? Does it have, author affiliations? If you talk about preprints and you've got some person with ulterior incentives saying, here's my paper, it's all true, it's not peer reviewed, and then you have the news referring to it because it's got a DOI, it's a published article. These little tools can say, well, actually, if I run that paper through it, these people weren't trained in the space and therefore haven't written a truly academic paper, and you can start saying that's probably a flag. I think the really interesting part gets into the peer review side of it, things. And so Repater can say, okay, can we see who the reviewers were, and can we see who the authors were, and can we see if there's any connections between the people here, and start flagging fraud that way? For me personally, which is quite controversial, I think the biggest thing that needs to change in that space is paid peer review. And I argue with editors a lot about this, who say it'll never work, we tried it before, all of these things. And I just don't believe them. I think that's the last great shakeup in academic publishing, is as soon as somebody solves paid peer review, we will have a lot more transparency with some of these tools to check that you are the right person. But that's how we'll get to fast, good, open publishing. And for people who say, well, we can't afford to pay more, well, I'd say a lot of the value add from academic publishing is peer review. So that should be the thing that's paid for above anything else to begin with. Copy editing is cool, makes it look pretty, but the machines can help with that in the next 10 years, I'm sure.
While talking about, the next 5 to 10 years, Mark, what do you think is the future of Figshare, and what would, at a very broad level, be your plans for the next few years? And where would you like to see the company in maybe, say, 5 years, provided, of course, you kind of, don't move on to a new fantastic idea, Figshare kind of developing and growing?
I'll go and solve paid peer review. That's a small thing right now. But I'm very happy with Figshare. Been here for a decade, and it's been great to see it grow. I think the National Institute of Health GREY initiative, which is Generalist Repository Ecosystem Initiative, is a great way to fund repositories to work together and to have consistent standards across repositories. And so for that reason, I don't care if it's Figshare or other systems that are providing this functionality, but I think every university in the world needs something like this. And there's a lot of universities out there, and there's a lot of universities that don't have a system like this. So I think that Figshare could serve a role in making more content openly available. I think for me, it's thinking about two factors of two different types of content. And that is, if you want a more equitable society and you believe that people have good ideas no matter where they are, then if you put an academic lens on it, I think a big goal for the academic publishing dissemination community should be, does anybody anywhere have the ability to publish papers or data in a fast, good, open way, and to access papers and data? When I say data, I mean non-traditional research outputs, just everything else, all of the files. I think we can serve a great role in doing that. As I said, there's 6 million outputs on Figshare infrastructure that wouldn't have been there otherwise. And so I think we can facilitate aiming towards this. Does anybody anywhere have the ability to publish papers and data and access papers and data? So for the next 10 years, that's the big focus for us is how can we help do that? And obviously scaling to more universities, working with more publishers, working with more universities can do that. I think from a technical viewpoint, as I mentioned before, we've been building this for 10 years. We have some great technology. The colleague I was talking about the DALI stuff, we have this joke that Figshare is never going to be finished. You can build products that serve that one role and they're finished. But as the ecosystem evolves, as there's more types of content, as there's more kinds of, we allow you to upload any file format and we aim to preview it in the browser. But for things like Jupyter notebooks or IPython notebooks, it's very hard to have that executable file run in browser on a platform like Figshare without querying some third-party APIs or having very large compute for all of the dependencies. And so there's always going to be more stuff we can do to make that better because there is an unlimited amount of file formats. So I'll be very happy with the tech stack developing on that level and making everything more computational. Me personally, I think I'd like to just keep encouraging people to do that. I think I'm more of a science or an idea communicator on that level than I am as, the other aspects of running a business. And so I think I'd like to concentrate more on that side of things going forward for the next 10 years or solve peer review.
How do you keep yourself updated about, everything that's happening, maybe in the industry and even beyond? I mean, some of the progress that we're making in technology or open data.
It's always good to have a curious mind on those things. I think just reading everything and anything you can is always a good thing. But I'm lucky in that I work at an organization that has 12 different companies working in the space who all share a Slack where people can say, hey, did you see this? Hey, did you see that? But you get, the usual parties. It's very, Golly Kitchen, Twitter. I'm very active on Twitter and have been for the last 10 years. It's a very welcoming community in the academic space. But I think, following podcasts like this and making sure that you're listening to what's happening, I think a lot of people will self-serve because the way in which you discover content these days is pretty easy. I'm still upset when something's happening and I don't have access to it, whether it's an academic paper and you have to use illicit methods to get there, or there's a boxing match on and I haven't paid for it kind of thing. I think if you want to consume the content, it's very easy to find it. So, using things like Spotify or using Google Feeds and things like this is the way to do it. Or come and work at Digital Science and you get to hear about all these things every day in the Reading Corner Slack channel. But maybe I'll start tweeting more of those out so you don't have to come and work at Digital Science to get that access.
What do you feel your personal mission is? What kind of impact do you want to leave on the science community or just world in general? And I know, I've heard you talk in many conferences. You personally are very passionate about this. Like you correctly mentioned, Mark, yes, Figshare is one solution, one way to solve this. But I think, you're really passionate about solving it as a community. Doesn't matter where it comes from.
As I mentioned at the beginning, I fell into this space. I never intended to come into this space. I liked working in a field where, it does have that. You feel like you're adding value. This isn't a diss to people who are, working at games companies or things like that, because games companies bring people lots of pleasure. But sometimes I see, company logos and company state kind of mottos, and you think, that's a strange thing for that company to have, as but everybody can change the world in their own way and in the job that they're doing. And if they have that belief, that's fantastic. And I think for whatever field you work in, but most notably the academic setting, which is full of interesting quirks and legacy systems and legacy infrastructure and legacy rules, I think for me, it's always been to put more value in than you take out. And this is something we had to address very early on as being a company in the private sector. You know, as I said, I didn't go out looking to become a private company. I had 2 other conversations at the beginning of Figshare, both of which I didn't seek out, one with the Wellcome Trust, one with the Sloan Foundation, about whether this could operate as a not-for-profit. I think if it had have done, it wouldn't have survived. We wouldn't have focused on sustainable business model right from the very start. And I think that's a big question for anybody looking to work in this space or who's got an idea is, regardless of how you set up this structure, just think about the sustainability as the number one priority at all times and the incentive structures. And I think because of that, I got asked very early on, you know, I've had some very direct questions in different countries around the world, you know, saying, you know, what are you doing here? What are you as an Englishman doing here, telling us what to do with data, right? And, you know, flogging your wares. And I'm like, we always say if it's a good fit, it's a good fit. If it's not, don't worry. You know, we're doing okay. And that message is always put more value in than you take out. And I think a life well lived, whether it's friendships, companies, the academic space, that idea of if you can aim to put more value in than you take out, then it will be a life well lived.
Thank you so much, Mark, for being our guest today. I really enjoyed our conversation today. And obviously, I hope to meet you quite often being in the UK, and, you know, the fact that you speak at so many events, and a lot of the events are common, perhaps, you know, for all of us to attend.
Thank you. Drink soon.
So thank you, everyone, for joining us. Stay tuned for our next episode.
All Things SciComm is brought to you by ScienceTalks, a science media channel that aims to make science accessible to all. We publish articles, videos, podcasts, and magazines. To read a transcript of this episode or watch it on YouTube, visit sciencetalks.org. Also, write to us with your views, questions, and guest recommendations at contact@sciencetalks.org. Science Talks, bringing science to you.